Welcome to Lighten Up, the Art of Living Clutter-free, a podcast for people who are ready to clear the physical, the mental, and the emotional clutter that's been weighing them down. I'm Melanie Cohen, your host, coach, and guide. Each week, we talk about the clutter you can see and the clutter you can't. The stuff in your home, the noise in your head, the expectations, habits, and unmade decisions that quietly drain your energy. This isn't about perfection or minimalism. It's about creating space for what actually matters in this season of your life. Let's lighten up together, starting now. Hello and welcome back to Lighten Up, the Art of Living Clutter-free, the podcast where we talk about all things clutter. I'm Melanie Cohen, your host, guide, and coach. And today I have a special guest with me. I have Deborah Nieman, who is the author of Homegrown and Handmade, Raising Goats Naturally, and Goats Giving Birth. I can't wait to dive into today. So first of all, Deborah, thank you so much for being here today.
You're welcome. I am excited to be here.
Awesome. So for my city folk, which I think predominantly my listeners are either city folk or living in a suburb of a larger city. And I'm excited to have you here for a whole host of reasons. But the reality is you reached out to me first because there is such a thing as farm clutter. So before we get into that, let me give you an opportunity to talk a little bit about how you became the goat raiser, or I'm sorry, your website is the Thrifty Homesteader. Let's start there. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, in 2002, we moved to the country so we could start growing our own food organically with absolutely zero experience. But I thought people have been growing their own food since the beginning of time, so it can't be that hard, right? Like they didn't have degrees in agriculture 1,000, 2,000 years ago, and people didn't starve, so we can do it. And the reality is it wasn't as easy as I thought, but it also wasn't as hard as most people thought. And we made so many mistakes, and there were so many things that we did not expect. And one of the things that I never crossed my mind is what a problem we would have with clutter. It's like you've got a house, right? And even though that attic and basement are not really being used, they get filled up with stuff. And what do you think happens when you have a barn? It's like, we don't need this thing right now. Let's just stick it in the barn. And it's really, really bad.
Oh, all right. So let's first talk about your foray, if you will, into becoming. Do you call yourself a farmer, or what do you call yourself?
We're somewhere between a farmer and a homesteader. A modern
Okay.
homesteader is somebody who grows their own food for themselves, and a farmer is somebody who grows food for other people. And
Gotcha.
we do sell our eggs at a grocery store, and we also sell goat milk soap, but it is not our primary income. So
Gotcha.
we're straddling that line.
Okay. All right. So thank you. I never knew that there was a difference between a farmer and a homesteader. So already I've learned new and exciting things. So that's great. Were you someone who, even though you weren't planting and growing all of your own food, is it something that you did in a small garden at your home? Did you keep, you have beautiful plants behind you. For those of you who are listening, she has beautiful plants. I do not. That's a story for another day. Or I will just say, some people talk about having a brown thumb, and I think I have a black thumb. Like, I just have to start talking about a plant and it starts to wilt, which I am sure is stuff that can be learned. I have been taught so many times, but I am that gal who killed a succulent. I've killed a cactus, like those things that are supposed to survive almost anything.
I
Tell
kill
me,
succulents.
okay, I feel so much better about myself now. So tell me a little bit about your experience before, like diving all the way in.
Yeah, so I grew up eating all kinds of junk food and fast food and, canned ravioli, frozen pizza, all the things. And I never heard anybody talk about the connection between your diet and your health until I was pregnant with my first child. And when I heard that, I was like, what? Really? So, like, if my kids have a better diet, they won't be sick all the time like I was. And I started reading labels and I was shocked and angry to discover that my blueberry muffin mix did not contain real blueberries. I thought I was doing something semi good, right? Like, because I was buying this blueberry muffin mix and there were no blueberries in it. It was just artificially colored, artificially flavored blue bits. And so then I started reading all the labels and started cooking from scratch. And then just the more I learned about food, and this was in the 90s, the more I learned about food, the more unhappy I was and the more I felt deceived. And like I'm not getting what I thought I was getting. And finally, at some point, I just said, you know what? I think if we really want to eat a natural organic diet, we're going to have to just do it ourselves. And so that's when we moved to the country. And we did try a couple of gardens in the suburbs before. I always have our first garden, I literally thought you just plant the seeds and come back a few months later and harvest dinner. Like, I didn't realize, like, you needed to water and weed, and, like, I didn't understand why the plants weren't growing, and, all we got out of there was, like, a handful of very stringy green beans, which were completely inedible, like, you coulda used them for dental floss, and so then I was like, I guess I gotta learn something here." So, by the time we moved to the country, I had successfully grown a few tomatoes and peppers and a little lettuce, and that was about it.
My grandmother, my mother's mother, cooked everything from scratch and had a garden while she was working and sewing and knitting and crocheting everything, like all of it. She was the aspiration for so many people. But she had tomatoes and cucumbers and peppers, like you mentioned, string beans she had. And I saw it as so magical. She didn't live far from where we lived. She lived in the suburbs, not the country, or that's what we would have called it when I was growing up. I grew up in an apartment in New York City. My mother had a lot of plants, but we didn't do anything else. Nothing. There were no fruits or vegetables in the house. There wasn't a basil plant in the window like so many people have now. I've killed basil plants too. I should just throw that in.
Me too.
But to me, because my grandmother made everything from scratch, I really did have a better understanding, I think, of the way we should fuel our bodies. For those who have been listening for a while, I came to all of this having started as a weight loss coach. So I discovered the need for fresh fruits and vegetables 25 years ago, knowing that maybe it's something I should have already known, but I'm not gonna go back in time and beat myself up for it because we made big changes at that point in time. And, I wonder on a regular basis what would happen if I did produce my own as opposed to going to the farmer's market or the supermarket. Are really blessed where we live to have lots of options when it comes to that. People are often amazed when I say within a 5-block radius, there are a half a dozen different fruit and vegetable stands that have good stuff. It's just knowing which one has the best blueberries or who has the cheapest strawberries that week or something like that. Um, so, talk to me a little bit about then, you started so you can grow your own food and you're growing fruits and vegetables. When did the goats come into play?
Was insanely ambitious. I mean, I thought we needed to grow everything. And so within the first year, we had planted a dozen fruit trees. We had planted a garden. We had gotten goats and cows and sheep and chickens and turkeys and ducks. And within another year, a couple years later, we had pigs. Just, it was crazy what I thought we needed to do. And we had 3 children, and they were all like 9 to 14. So they were old enough to help, which is the only reason it was at all doable.
Mm,
People would say, that sounds like a lot of work. And I was like, oh, there's 5 of us. So like each person does about 30 to 45 minutes in the morning and in the evening, and that's it. Well, as they started leaving home, I started doing the math and it was like, oh, well, 1 left. Now instead of doing 30 to 45 minutes morning and evening, I'm doing an hour to an hour and a half morning and evening. And at the end of that, when they're all gone, it's like 8 to 10 hours a day. So that was when it
that's
was
a
like,
lot.
yeah. And so we gradually started getting rid of things. Like we got rid of the cows and
Mhm.
we got rid of the llamas and we just gradually got rid of various animals, and the goats, I was not prepared for how goats were gonna steal my heart, I just wanted some goat cheese, like, I thought that's all, I just want a couple of goats so I can have goat cheese, and, while everything else we were reducing, like the goats, we wound up ultimately I mean, we've had, like, between 20 and 30 goats for most of the last 20 years. because I just absolutely fell in love with them. They are so personable. Have people think they're a vegetarian dog, which they are not in terms of like, no, you cannot let them live in your house. You cannot put them in a dog crate. You cannot let them sleep in your bed with you. But they do, people do wind up getting attached to them like dogs because they are very personable, but they need to live out.
So you made me think of a bunch of things. One is that's a lot of goats because we had been talking earlier about how my mother-in-law and her late husband had a ranch on the Big Island of Hawaii. And Pete and Repeat, their two goats, just more than I had seen in New York City, were like, such a pleasure. And what did they do? But they took care of the banana peels and the rinds of the avocados and the guava and all of those kinds of things, or the bottom of the head of lettuce that you don't use. But I saw a video recently. I get like anybody else, I'm scrolling and I see a little video and I'm like, and there was a goat wearing diapers in a house. So that to me means they really were trying to make that goat a pet. But if you have to put a diaper on your pet, do they belong inside? I guess is the question.
Yeah, it's a good question. And the answer is no, they don't. And I'm assuming that was a baby goat.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, um, a lot of people are just, it's like puppy mills, but with baby goats, and they will sell it to
Mm,
anybody. And I
gotcha.
have an application. So, like, when somebody wants to buy a goat from me, they have to fill out an application. Half the people get rejected because they think that a goat can live in their house, like, because they've done zero research. And I have an article on my website about why your goat cannot live in your house. And I have photos in there of things that were removed from a baby goat's stomach because
Mm,
this baby, like, people don't realize goats are ruminants, which means they have a four-chambered stomach and they need to be eating like all the time. And so that's why people think like they eat everything. It doesn't mean that that won't kill them. And so these people had had this baby goat in their house for a couple of months, and then one day it was not feeling so good, so they took it to the vet,
mm.
and they did surgery, and they pulled out of this baby goat's stomach, like, hair ties, plastic bags, balloons, plastic pieces of a game, like, so much stuff. And so I have a picture of, like, all the stuff they pulled out of this goat's stomach. And sadly, the goat still died 2 days later. And so, and the person that this happened to let me have the photos so that I could put them on the website to hopefully educate people about why goats cannot live in your house. So,
Sure. I mean, at the end of the day, my cats will get into hair ties and rubber bands and strings of things, and it's not good for them either. I mean, we go through all the baby proofing when we're pregnant and the kids are coming along, but no matter what the pet is, you have to make sure that it's a safe and secure place. I have two different friends who have rabbits, and that similarly to the goats to be really careful because they're going to eat paper and other things that they find. It leaves the question, are there animals that are not well suited to be pets like the goats, or does it depend on who is the human to that animal? And are they doing a great job of protecting them from, the things that they can get into trouble with? Okay. So I love all of this. I didn't realize that like you all dove into the deep end so quickly. So, talk to me about, or talk to us about the books. What have you specifically helped people with through your books and your website?
basically how, well, the first book was Homegrown and Handmade, which was originally published in 2011, and then I did a revised and expanded edition in 2017. And, it is all the things. It's like there's a gardening chapter and an orchard chapter and a homegrown dairy chapter and a homegrown fiber chapter. Fiber is in like wool and llama fiber. There is a
Gotcha.
pig chapter, a maple syrup and a honey chapter. Like we really tried to do everything. I don't think there was anything we didn't try to do. And so it all of that is in homegrown and handmade. Then as I but the thing is, goats were actually very hard, and this is what people do not understand. Not only are goats not suited to be in your house, because literally everything you see around here, like, the goats would be eating all of this. You would have to put them in an empty room for them to be safe in your house.
Mm.
Goats are not even native to North America. So this is why they are so much harder than anything else. Honestly, some of the people who have the hardest time with goats are people who were raising cattle because they think they're just small cows, and they're not. They're not even the same as sheep. Their nutritional needs are different. The drug dosages that they have are different per pound. The parasites that they get are different, and they have different resistance. And so one of the reasons that I became an expert on goats accidentally was because my goats were dying and nobody knew why. Most vets
Mm.
are not trained on goats, and they see very few goats. The census of goats says there's only about 2 million in the United States, and 75% of those are meat goats. So there's less than 500,000 pet goats. There's more parakeets than there are goats. Like, there's more. I went crazy one day researching. Like, I couldn't find anything. Like, I mean, you gotta go really, like, llamas, you gotta get really exotic to get something that there's less of than goats, you know? And so there's just not. So not only do a lot of people not know about how to care for goats, but a lot of vets are also not able to help you. Like, they'll do the wrong dosages for drugs. They can't tell the difference. This is so sad. They can't tell that a goat is underweight because they don't know what to expect.
Mm.
And so that's why, by the time I learned enough to keep my goats alive, I had enough information to write a 300-page book. So, because my goats were dying from copper deficiency, which 4 different vets told me was impossible in goats.
Mm.
And I only discovered because I literally dove into the scientific research. I was lucky at the time. I was at Illinois State University and I had access to their scholarly database, and I was able to search the scientific literature and actually contact the researchers. Like, this was the emerging research in 2006 and 2007. They did not know how much copper goats needed until the early 2000s. They thought it was the same as sheep. And the reality is, goats need almost 10 times as much copper as sheep do.
So where does copper come from in a goat's diet?
Well, that's the problem with being in the United States. They're not native to North America, and that they're also not grazers, they're browsers, which means that they eat bushes and trees and all of that kind of stuff. Bushes and trees have a much higher mineral content than grass, and so almost everybody tries to turn them into grazers like sheep and cows. And so they can't get enough minerals from grass and even weeds. I mean, weeds have more nutrients in them than grass does, but I just cry when somebody's like, "So we just brush hogged our pasture. What grass should we plant?" And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, you just destroyed a goat buffet." Like, the goats would have taken care of those bushes for you. Like, that's what they should be eating, are your bushes and your trees. And that's why they have problems with worms, because when they're pooping, because they're not used to eating from their toilet. They're used to eating up here. There's an old
Gotcha.
saying, goats should never eat below their knees.
Wow.
So sheep and cows have much higher tolerance for worms than goats do. It's incredibly different. So that's why it's challenging.
So where are goats typically from? Is that South America, which was my first guess? Maybe I should just have you answer instead of trying to guess and trying to look smart when I'm not. I don't know.
Well, they started out as desert animals, actually. There is no grass in the desert at all. They started out in the Middle East, and then a lot of people took them to Europe, which worked well because the mountains. There's a lot of browse in the mountains. There's a lot of evergreens, and so they adapted well to that because they could still eat brush and bushes and trees
Right.
year round. But and this is why goats never got very popular in the United States prior to the last 20 years, because they didn't do well. They weren't very healthy. They were not very productive. They were called the poor man's cow by a lot of people. People just got them if they couldn't afford to buy a cow because they were cheaper, which is not the
Well,
case anymore.
I think a lot of people are like, no, you don't eat, you eat goat cheese, but you don't eat goat. I live in a neighborhood that is well, not predominantly. I live in a neighborhood that has a lot of people from the Middle East all over. And so it makes sense to me listening to this Well, of course, the Middle Eastern stores sell goat year round. Like it makes sense now. Okay. So you're guiding people in helping them better understand how to raise goats. You've written books about everything that have had chapters from everything from maple syrup and honey. I heard all of that. Do you have a favorite animal on your homestead?
Yeah, it would be the goats.
And do you have something that you grow that's a favorite?
The first thing that comes to mind are the heirloom tomatoes. Most people think like, oh, tomatoes are red. I didn't really like tomatoes very much when before we were growing them ourselves. And there's like over 100 different varieties of tomatoes. They're all different sizes and colors and shapes. And, you know, oh my gosh, when I got started, I think the first year I probably bought 15 different kinds, and they're all different, and I love them all for different reasons. There's a white tomato, like for tomato soup, actually like a white tomato or a manna orange tomato. I forget the name of the white one. I wanna say something like white ghost or something, but the Amana orange tomato, like, those make the most amazing tomato soup. Way better than any red tomato I've ever had.
I think I've come to realize that the uglier the tomato, the more I enjoy the taste. And I definitely am picky about my tomatoes. Like I love grape tomatoes. I don't like cherry tomatoes. I also like my tomatoes very firm. I think all of these are the things that you learn over time. I also live with a man who hates tomatoes in their natural state. He likes to say he likes them in their most mutilated form salsa, tomato sauce, and ketchup. Great. More tomatoes for me then. Okay. And so let's get down to the nitty gritty. One of the ways that we were introduced is we were talking about the clutter that exists on the farm. You said there are two barns on your property? Okay, so if you had your way, you took your husband, tied his hands behind his back or blindfolded him, whatever, what would happen to the stuff in the barns?
Most of it would go in a dumpster. Like, we've actually in the last 3 years, I think we've rented a dumpster every year and filled it up, and I mean a big one, like the big construction site kinda dumpsters and
Right.
filled it up, and there's still more. It's just and there's so much stuff, like, and you know you know how people collect those little bread twisties?
Mm-hmm. I
And,
do.
like, I'm sure you've seen a few of those. We used to do that when we lived in the suburbs. Well, like, we have that problem with baling twine, and it is like a running joke among people who have a farm with livestock, is that every small bale, which is like 70 pounds, has 2 pieces of baling twine around it, and nobody wants to throw away their baling twine. Like, even though they're gonna have 2 more strings tomorrow, they don't wanna get rid of the 2 they just cut off of this bale today. So there's just a lot, or the same thing with, like, a bag of you buy chicken feed in 50-pound bags, and goat feed comes in 50-pound bags. "Oh, that's a good bag. I gotta save that bag because it could be used for something."
So, okay, but let me ask a question because when I'm talking to people about clutter, people think of things that typically people have too much of. It can be books, paper, clothing, and very often, the person who really searches me out is a woman in the middle of life. Our bodies are changing, so the clothing can be clutter. Either it's a size that's bigger and I just got to hang on because you never know, or the smaller sizes. If I ever lose that 10 pounds that I gained in menopause or the COVID-15, whatever you want to call it, that all sounds typical. Too many wooden spoons or too many spatulas, I think is something that I come across very often. Often clutter is aspirational. People who bought a particular kitchen appliance because they were going to use it all the time. And then it didn't get used, but I have to hang on to it because you never know when I might need a panini press or something like that. And so most of us are listening and we're like, well, I try to repurpose things. Are those things that are repurposable?
So you can use some baling twine to tie up your tomato plants in the garden, you know?
Okay.
Or if you find a hole in the fence, you can use it for that. So
Hmm.
maybe keep 10 pieces around, you know? I mean, because the thing is, there's going to be more. Like every bale of hay has two more strings. So
Hmm.
if you know, like, oh, the tomato plants are starting to get big, start saving some to tie up the tomato plants to the stakes. But
And is
yeah,
this something that wherever you get your hay, whatever feed store, I suppose, they don't want it back to reuse?
well, it gets delivered directly from the farmer who cuts it. And when they buy it, it's in a big spool. And the baler wraps it around, cuts it, and ties it. And so it can't be used by them again.
Gotcha. Gotcha. I mean, because I think those are the things that, like the shame in it is, what have I reused? We have t-shirts that we made blankets out of, so great. You're not going to make a blanket out of every t-shirt that has a stain, a rip, a tear, or has an amazing memory because you'll never forget that concert or that sports team or whatever. And, we've had jewelry repurposed. I had an artisan on and she repurposes clothing and she makes these beautiful wall hangings, but you can't get every piece that you've ever had. And I think that's where a lot of us have frustration is that we would like to see things be reused, but they can't, And maybe the future has better ways of utilizing things, but for now we can only do our best. Okay. So you've got all this stuff. You clearly would get rid of all of it tomorrow given the opportunity. What's the fight? Oh, no, fight's not a fair word. What's the argument from your husband that's hard to combat?
Well, I don't think it's very hard to combat. I mean, he just always thinks he's gonna use it all, and I'm like, "No, you're not. Like, there's no way you are ever going to use all of this," you know? It's funny when you talked about aspirational clutter before, I got one for you I bet you have not heard before.
I'm sure you do.
Actually, a couple, because he's an electrical engineer, and so talk about aspirational. Before EVs were all the rage and you could buy them at any car dealer, he kept a car and a motorcycle that both were no longer drivable because he was going to turn them into electric vehicles. So they finally got donated to charity, but they sat there for a very long time. I mean, by the time that car got donated to charity, the wheels were rusted shut, like it wouldn't roll anymore. They just dragged it onto the flatbed because the wheels were so rusty they wouldn't even turn.
Sure. I think, for, people who watch any of those hoarding TV shows, often those people have a garage that has a car that I'm going to, fix up. Because it's a 1957, Chevy or whatever, and you can't let it go. And, so many of those things they don't make the parts for anymore, or if they're out there, they are really hard to track down. But you see a lot of other stuff that is a little more alien, if you will, to someone who lives in the city. But it can be just as hard to let those things go as the kids' art projects from when they were young kids or your college and high school year. I won't get rid of my yearbooks. I love them and I look at them. If you told me you never looked at them, then maybe it's time to let them go. But if it's hard to let a blanket go, it's going to be hard to let something else go. If it's hard to let, things that are we consider special or worth a lot of money, sure, the stuff that's in the barn is stuff that's worth a lot of money, whether it's going to get used or not. What's the thing that frustrates you the most when it comes to that clutter?
Well, some of it's literally dangerous. I have gotten injured before tripping over things.
Mm,
Things have fallen on me and stuff like that. So that's the biggest part. And in fact, I even like did some searching online once and like the numbers of people who get injured by clutter is actually a really big number.
it is. It
Yeah.
is. And worse as we age, as we're, if balance becomes an issue as we age, too much stuff around you is just that much more dangerous. Or as I like to say to some of the hoarders that I know, is if the fire department had to come, would they be able to get in and through be able to get a stretcher in and out? And people, like anything else in life, oh, that would never happen to me. But if I see it on the news, if I hear the story from someone that I know, then it does happen to people. It could happen to anybody. That's scary.
Right.
That's scary. Um, and are there ways to communicate to people that have a hard time letting that stuff go? Like really, like what needs to happen for someone to say, "Okay, you're right. Let's let it go." Like what's the straw that breaks the camel's back, so to speak?
Well, almost literally broke something on me. I mean, one time after I tripped on something that had been broken and had been sitting there for years. I don't even know how many years because he was going to fix it. After I tripped on it and, wound up with my knees iced,
Mm,
then he got rid of it.
okay. So,
The
but
one
we don't want you to keep having I don't want anybody to keep having injuries just so we can get rid of stuff.
Yeah.
What I'm hearing is like for so many of us, if you could just, I don't know, like wiggle your nose or do the I dream of Jeannie thing, that stuff would all be gone, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And then the question is, how long would it take? You know? I think there are things that I hear people say when they're having a hard time letting go of things. Like, I need it just in case, but it costs so much money. What would it cost to replace it? But there's a lot of like, what if, and that fear of regret of letting something go. I'm going to regret it later. And my answer always is, how much would it cost to replace it? Like, is it really that bad to let it go? Questions like, when's the last time you used it? If I used it in the last month, I need it. If I used it in the last 6 months, I might need it. And I would assume, on a farm in the Midwest, you're going to get cold weather and you're going to get hot weather. And there are things that are only used, at a particular season. So then I haven't used it in the last year is a better, question to ask. And even so, well, yeah, I didn't use it in the last year, but you never know. You never know what might happen. I have to hang on to that dress because I might get invited to the Oscars. No, probably not. And the same, would be true anything, on a farm, whether it's in the house or in a barn or something that's kept outside. What's one thing that you just want to make sure that everybody hears before we finish up today?
Having more space is never the answer if you have a clutter problem.
Yes.
If the idea of having a tiny house is horrifying to you because you're like, where would I put all my stuff? Then maybe it's time to like think about like, well, what's really important to you? Because I feel it's funny. My husband was a Boy Scout. He went all the way through Eagle Scouts, and he wants to be prepared for everything. Like he will be at the store to buy something for building, like he needs a 2x4 or something. And instead of just getting one, he buys five because he's probably going to need those other four, at some point. But then when he needs them, he doesn't know where they are. And it's like, "What? I know I bought extras last time. Where did I put them?" And when you have 2 barns, and they're not small, one is 30 by 100 and the other one is, 40 by 60. So they are big buildings, and the 40 by 60 was so full. When we rented the first dumpster, that one was so full. There was just a single file path through it from the front door to the
Right.
back door. Like, that
Right.
was it. Everything else, I mean, it was crazy, And after filling up a dumpster, you go in there and you're like, "Wow, this still is full of stuff."
Right. Right. And I think you were talking about, like, well, if I'm buying one, 4x4, I need to, buy, five of them. That's the same as so many other things. And I think often we're tricked into buying those things because of a sale, you know?
Yeah.
Like
Oh,
the
yeah.
tub of ice cream is now 2 for such and such. Do you really need 2 tubs, of ice cream? The cans of whatever are, 5 4. If you only need one of them, why are you buying 5? Now, it's easier for me to say no thank you because I live in a New York City apartment. These are not big apartments. I hear that barn and I'm like, oh my God, my entire block could fit into that barn. But that doesn't mean that people don't try to overstuff stuff larger space. And I hear so many people say, I wish I had more square footage, or I wish I had more acreage, or whatever. And the question is that so you can spread out the things that you have and make it cleaner and neater and more organized? Or is it just an opportunity to get more stuff because now you have more space? And I am a firm believer in I have everything I really need. So if I had more space, it would just be cleaner or easier to clean, because more stuff means, you have to move this and move that to dust. And, if there's less there, all upkeep becomes easier. And I tell people on a regular basis that I'm not an organizer, that I'm a declutterer. Because if if we're still having a hard time keeping things organized, then we probably still have too much stuff that we didn't get let go. And that doesn't mean you're going to do it all in one fell swoop. It's kind of like throwing spaghetti at the wall and seeing what sticks. Let me see after this next declutter phase if I get to the point where it's easier to maintain or makes me feel more comfortable. And I tell people on a regular basis, I am not a minimalist. I have no interest in being a minimalist. I love things. The question is, what's that fine line between like the perfect amount of stuff and too much? And at that point, it doesn't matter whether we're talking about a bedroom, a kitchen, a yard, a barn, an attic, a basement, like whatever that is. When does it become too much? I think that this has been fascinating. Okay. So one of the things that I ask every guest is to share what their clutter is. You have been very upfront with that, but I kind of hear it's my husband's clutter because he's the one that doesn't want to let that stuff go. And when I talk about clutter, we don't just talk about stuff. We talk about mental clutter. We talk about digital clutter. We talk about calendar clutter. We talk about 24-hour news cycle clutter. We talk about social media clutter, like anything that is a block to us getting our stuff done is clutter. So what would you say is the clutter that you very naturally own, not him?
My inbox on my computer. We could talk for an hour about that. I mean, oh my gosh. Yeah, because I have an online business. And so, that is actually where I spend 40 to 60 hours a week is on my
Mhm.
computer. And I
Right.
have horrible FOMO, so I feel like I need to be subscribed to way too many newsletters. And because it's like, that, that sounds like a newsletter that's going to give me some really great information at some point. And
At
yeah,
some point.
at some point, I'm going to need this. And every now and then I will suddenly like wake up and say, oh my gosh, I have been deleting emails from this person without even looking at them for 3 years, 4 years,
Right.
5 years. Like I
Right.
bought a thing from this place 5 years ago and I'm still getting emails from them. I don't need their stuff anymore. So
You hear the numbers on digital clutter. The research shows that the average person has 1,000 unread emails. I don't think that number is accurate. I think it is so much higher than that. And how many of us have multiple email accounts? Like I have one that is strictly for business. I have the one that I've had since 1997 or 98, whenever it was that Google started. I have that one, which is the one where all the junk is, and then a personal one that's newer, so it's not as crowded. And I did get my old personal email down to 0 unread. There was still a lot of email, and it had to work a little bit harder, and I got that one down to, I think it was 40 emails, things that I wasn't willing to get rid of yet because there were pictures and there were things that I didn't know what to do, but I was like, "I am so much better than so many other people out there." But I think that digital clutter, the email and text and direct message clutter is the paper clutter of the past. Those people who had a really hard time letting go of newspapers and magazines because I didn't have a chance to read it and I'm going to miss an article. I'm going to miss an article.
yeah, you got it.
If
Because that used to be my problem. Yeah, we used to have piles and piles of paper around here because I was afraid to throw stuff away. And we had like 6 file cabinets, which are still in our basement, and now the stuff in them is 20 years old. and it needs to go out in a dumpster.
Right.
Because now
I mean, I
everything's
keep hearing, if the article's 20 years old, is it really important information for me to have now? Because how many different ways has technology advanced making that article, less necessary? But I get it. Like I really do get it. I see it in my family. There, is an ongoing issue with that. And there are a lot of people who don't want to get rid of books. My husband and I have been up and down this before, but I'm kind. He was an English and comparative lit major in college. Of course he loves books, and I love books because I love books.
yeah.
And but again, like, how many books do you need to satisfy, your life? Is keeping the books because you're actually going to read them? Or I like to say we're showing off what we have read. We look so intelligent because we have these books. I have a ton of children's books. I don't have grandchildren yet. I have those children's books not because I anticipate grandchildren or visiting nieces and nephews or friends who visit with young children, but because some of them are from my childhood and I love them. And I want people to know that we don't have to get rid of everything if it's something that really gives us joy. And the last thing I'll say, and I think this is really important, is when you're asking the questions about whether or not you should keep something, all things have energy. People, animate objects, inanimate objects all have energy. And if the energy is good, you have to keep it, enjoy it, experience it, whether it's a book or a painting on the wall or a tool for the kitchen or whatever that is. But if it doesn't have good energy, we need to let it go. And at that point, it doesn't matter who it belonged to, who gifted it to you, how much it cost, any of those things that we think give things value. That value is not important if it has bad mojo or bad juju or just bad energy. And for that, it doesn't matter whether you're living in the city, the suburbs, or the country, really being able to ask that question. Deborah,
Yeah.
I'm so happy you were here today. One more time. I know I asked already, but what's something you want to make sure that gets covered that maybe we didn't get covered yet?
Well, I think we did a good job of covering everything. Like, if you live in the city or whatever, like, don't think, "Oh, I need to go rent a storage unit for your stuff." Like, no, you don't need more space. You just need to prioritize.
Right. There are more storage units in the United States than there are in all other countries combined, which I think says an awful lot about consumption, in the Western world. I try not to demonize storage units because there are times. I just spoke with a client earlier today who had her floors redone. So stuff had to go in storage short term. If you were redoing your home, you might need it. If you were moving and the new space wasn't ready yet, or someone unfortunately dies and you know that this stuff needs to get handled, but maybe you're just not ready to handle it right now. And my kids, when they went to college out of state. I wasn't bringing all their crap home. Like, let them, use storage over the summer. But too many people have storage units where they don't even know what's in them, because they haven't seen them in not just a year, but haven't seen them in a decade. And at that point, we're also wasting money because we're spending money on space. So thank you for bringing that up. I think it's an important thing. Deborah, thank you so much for being here today. I loved how unique we got to get in conversation.
You're welcome. It was a lot of fun. Thank you.
Definitely, definitely. Thank you. Thank you for listening to Lighten Up the Art of Living Clutter-Free. If this episode resonated, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who could use just a little bit of lightness. If you're ready for deeper support, you can work with me one-on-one or join my Lighten Up Clutter-Free Mindset Group program. You can find all the details at my website, thoughtfullycoaching.com. Until next time, progress over perfection. Messy action is better than no action at all. So let's lighten up.